That Geneva humiliation wasn't just awkward, it exposed the one thing Meghan Markle's entire rebrand machine has been desperately trying to hide from the world. That no matter how many designer outfits, staged humanitarian speeches, or emotional causes get attached to her name, the public simply is not showing up anymore. And the timing? Oh, that's where this story gets vicious. Because just days after Princess Catherine returned from Italy looking every inch the future queen, while entire streets erupted for her like royalty had finally returned to Europe, Meghan flew into Geneva expecting the exact same reaction, and instead walked straight into silence so loud it practically echoed through the empty barricades. Meghan Markle stepped out in Geneva for an important conversation, but ended up getting humiliated in the process. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Scamlot, she has taken her scams abroad. We've really got to hand it to Mrs. Grifter because her grifting knows no bounds. She landed in Switzerland wrapped in that carefully constructed global humanitarian image again. Tailored Armani suit, slicked back hair, serious face switched on like she was arriving at the United Nations to solve world peace herself. Everything about the visual screamed importance. Everything about the branding screamed relevance. But then came the part nobody on Meghan's team could control: the people. Or more accurately, the lack of them. Because while cameras zoomed in tight trying to create the illusion of significance, the wider footage told a completely different story. Empty walkways, empty barricades, cars driving past, cyclists barely slowing down, locals treating the entire thing like background noise on a Sunday afternoon. And online, the clip spread like wildfire because the contrast was just too brutal to ignore.
Meghan Markle's shocking humiliation in Geneva finally proves that she has just gone mad.
Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Scamalot, she has taken her scams abroad.
We've really got to hand it to Mrs. Grifter because her grifting knows no bounds.
She traveled to Geneva, Switzerland, and gave this speech. You know, she wants to be taken seriously. She's a humanitarian. She started Archwell Foundation, which already closed. She flies all the way over there, and would you take a look at the crowd that showed up or didn't? Like, literally nobody is on the side. They have all the ropes up to protect her from crowds coming. There's one woman in the background. No one is there.
Meghan Markle is stunningly oblivious to her own hypocrisy, and that is definitely beginning to damage her in the eyes of the public and the eyes of the media. You can't avoid the stark comparison between Meghan Markle posting and exploiting her daughter on Instagram and then her complaining that children are being exploited by social media companies. The hypocrisy is just plain for anyone to see.
Markle giving a speech, yapping her head off, and nobody's listening. There is nobody there. So
what made it even worse was that Europe had literally just witnessed the opposite scenario with Princess Catherine. That's the part Meghan's critics cannot stop obsessing over. Because only days earlier, Catherine stepped into northern Italy for her first major overseas appearance after her cancer recovery, and the reaction looked like something out of a royal documentary from the Diana era. Crowds packed into streets, children screaming her name, locals hanging from balconies just for a glimpse, entire plazas overflowing with people desperate to see her in person. No desperate PR push, no self-important speeches about herself, just quiet confidence and a woman who understood how to let the public come to her naturally. Princess Catherine had just made her first official overseas trip since her cancer diagnosis. She chose Reggio Emilia, a small, quiet city in northern Italy, to spotlight its world-renowned approach to early childhood education. And that's where the comparison became absolutely lethal for Meghan, because Catherine walked into Italy and people reacted emotionally. Meghan walked into Geneva and people kept walking.
What was your reaction when she came over?
She's amazing. I can't believe it my eyes.
I gave her a present. It was a little rose, and she was very happy. And then she said that my hat was very glamorous.
And the way she's approached the city and the experience shows a real interest, not just something, the facade.
The city practically exploded for Catherine. Thousands lined the streets during a workday, not a staged event, not paid attendees, real people. The mayor publicly honored her. Children pushed through crowds carrying flowers. People waited for hours just to watch her pass by for seconds. That kind of public affection cannot be manufactured. And the terrifying thing for Meghan's image team is that everyone watching online instantly noticed the difference.
I think it was
was around 5 p.m. Geneva time, and there was not one person in the crowd.
Nope.
Not one person in the barricades. So these people clearly showed up late. And we have to remember, too, this is on a Sunday. Princess Catherine got how many people? Thousands. 3,000 plus.
In a piazza.
In a piazza. She had 3,000 plus on a work day.
Princess Catherine even introduced herself to preschool children in Italian, calling herself Caterina, and the room melted instantly. There was warmth there, ease, authenticity, no performance, no desperation for validation, just presence. And while Catherine was still flying home to England, surrounded by headlines celebrating her return, Meghan suddenly announced she too was flying to Europe. 1 day later. That timing alone triggered immediate suspicion online because people started asking the same uncomfortable question. Was Geneva really about the cause? Or was it about competing for attention while Catherine dominated global headlines?
And again, we saw a lot of people that were just hanging around, but left. And it was one of those things, though, where even with a couple of days' notice, now it wasn't a week's notice, but it was a couple of days' notice. You're in a big European city, Geneva. Who showed up? No one. No one showed up. There were not mobs. There were not fans. There was nobody there.
And then came the detail critics could not stop ripping apart. Harry didn't go. He stayed home, completely absent from what insiders were calling Meghan's most important post-royal speech. That was not accidental. Sources immediately started whispering that Meghan wanted the spotlight fully on herself. No Harry distractions, no shared attention, just Meghan positioned beside global leaders looking like an independent international figure. That's why people online exploded when they realized how aggressively curated this entire appearance was becoming. Because suddenly it wasn't just a humanitarian visit anymore. It looked like branding, strategic branding. The cause itself, online safety for children, was undeniably serious. The lost screen memorial carried heartbreaking stories from real grieving families. Nobody questioned that pain. But critics began questioning why Meghan always seems to appear beside tragedy at moments when her own public image needs repairing. Wildfires, memorials, hospitals, grieving parents. Every single time, perfectly styled photographs somehow emerge with Meghan front and center looking solemn, compassionate, presidential almost. And Geneva pushed that criticism into overdrive because the visuals completely collapsed the illusion she was hoping to create. And that's when the humiliation transformed from embarrassing into catastrophic. Because once the footage of those empty streets escaped the controlled press angles, social media did what social media always does. It slowed everything down frame by frame. Suddenly, people weren't just laughing at the lack of crowds anymore. They were noticing details Meghan's team never wanted noticed. One clip showed a woman standing behind the barricade everyone assumed was there to support Meghan until viewers realized she was literally waiting for a bus. Another showed random pedestrians walking straight past the speech without even turning their heads. Cars rolled behind her while she spoke about becoming a global voice for children's online safety, and the whole thing started looking less like a major international appearance and more like somebody accidentally renting a public sidewalk for a photo shoot. And then came the facial expression people online could not stop replaying, because there was one tiny moment, barely a second long, where Meghan glanced toward the empty barricades and her entire face shifted, just slightly, but enough. Enough for people to immediately start saying that was the exact second she realized the Princess Catherine effect was not transferable simply because she flew to Europe wearing expensive clothes and attached herself to a serious cause. That expression spread everywhere because it exposed something Meghan's entire operation tries desperately to hide: insecurity. The realization that no amount of branding can force genuine public affection. The PR cleanup started almost instantly. Suddenly, anonymous sources claimed the sparse turnout happened because of strict security measures. But that excuse detonated in their faces within hours because the footage itself contradicted everything. There were literally open streets behind her, cars driving by, random people wandering freely through the area. Nobody looked blocked out. Nobody looked restricted. The truth looked painfully simple. Nobody cared enough to stop. And that's where the conversation took a much darker turn, because critics stopped talking about crowds and started talking about patterns. The same accusations resurfaced all over again, that Meghan repeatedly inserts herself into emotionally devastating situations whenever her relevance begins slipping. Wildfires in California, the Uvalde tragedy, Australia, hospitals, funerals, memorials, grieving parents. Every single controversy came rushing back into public discussion because Geneva suddenly looked less like humanitarian work and more like another carefully timed emotional rebranding campaign. Critics call her the tragedy vulture. We saw her after the Los Angeles fires. We saw her communing with grieving relatives. The timing made everything worse. Hours before flying to Switzerland to lecture the world about protecting children online, Meghan posted a photograph of her own daughter to millions of followers. That detail absolutely exploded online because critics immediately called out what they viewed as staggering hypocrisy. How do you stand on an international stage condemning the dangers of exposing children online while simultaneously using images of your own child to generate engagement before boarding the plane? That contradiction became symbolic of the entire Geneva disaster because every layer people examined seemed to expose another inconsistency underneath. Meghan wanted to look authentic, but the appearance felt staged. She wanted to appear globally respected, but the streets were empty. She wanted credibility, but critics saw branding. And worst of all for her image, the comparison to Princess Catherine just kept growing louder and louder with every passing hour. Because while Catherine walked through Italy looking calm, graceful, and naturally adored without forcing attention onto herself, Meghan looked like someone chasing the exact same emotional reaction and failing publicly in real time. That's what people could not stop talking about. Not just the empty chairs, the difference in energy. One woman walked into a city and the public flooded the streets. The other arrived expecting the same thing and got silence. And now insiders are saying Geneva may have exposed something even more dangerous for the Sussex brand. Exhaustion. Public exhaustion. Because every new reinvention follows the same cycle. A dramatic launch, a flood of headlines, emotional speeches, carefully managed press, then silence, then another rebrand, another important moment, another desperate attempt to reset public perception before the previous disaster fully fades away. But this time, the visual evidence was too brutal to spin. Empty barricades don't lie. Passing cars don't lie. And Europe had already shown the world what genuine public devotion looks like only days earlier. That's why Geneva hit so differently. It wasn't just another awkward Meghan Markle moment. It was the moment the illusion cracked wide open in front of the entire world. And now even people who once defended her are starting to ask the question her critics have been screaming for years. If the branding is this massive, the media coverage this aggressive, and the cause is this serious, then why does the public keep refusing to show up?